Okay, welcome everybody. Tonight we're going to finish our discussion on the halachas of Purim, and we basically finished going through most of the mitzvahs. What we have left to discuss is the Megillah. So that's all the halachas that relate to Megillah. That's pretty much going to be the topic of discussion tonight. And it's going to be a little bit of a blitz through all of them. So if you need me to stop, then you just unmute and let me know. But okay, so first we're going to talk about the time. When should you read the Megillah? The Megillah should be read in the night, and then you should read the Megillah again in the day. So night and then the day. And the night Megillah should really be done after Teis Kochavim when the stars come out. And you can read it all night until the morning, until Oz Shachar. But usually we say Zurizim Makdimin, meaning that we try to do it as early as possible. So as soon as it gets to night, we try not to delay and try to read the Megillah. In the morning, the Megillah can be read after Nates, after as soon as sunrise. If you need to do it a little earlier, after Alos, that's okay. But the Megillah can be read the entire day up until Shkia. That's what we usually say you read the Megillah, but we try to do it as early in the day as we can. So also normally this year's a little bit different because normally we fast right before we read the Megillah because Tiny Esther will be the day before Purim. So we'll be fasting and then we'll read the Megillah. And so a lot of times people have a hard time fasting through the Megillah. So the halacha is you shouldn't really eat or sleep before reading the Megillah once it gets to Purim. But if someone needs to eat in order to make it to the Megillah, and you're not feeling well to the fast, then it's okay to eat. But this year we don't have to worry about that because no one's fasting on Shabbos, so that's not going to be a problem. So in regards to the brachas, before the brachas that we say in the Megillah, so the reader of the Megillah, he makes three brachas. First he says Am Mikra Megillah, on reading the Megillah, Sha'as and Nisim. That's number two. The third one is Shechianu. And even though you say a Shechianu in the night, you should still say a Shechianu in the day because the main mitzvah is to read the Megillah in the day. You say Shechianu in the night and in the day. And then also the bracha should be said while standing, because just most brachas that we say on a mitzvah are said while standing. There's a little bit of machlokas, a little bit of an argument about whether or not everyone who's listening to the Megillah reading also needs to be standing as well. I think the minhag is that we usually stand. And then at the end, after we finish reading the Megillah, we make another bracha. This bracha is called Haraves Rivenu. This is interesting because the Aruch Shulchan says that if one is reading by himself, okay, let's say you can't go to shul, you're just reading the Megillah on your own. So the Aruch Shulchan says that you should make all three of the regular brachas that before the Megillah, which is on reading the Megillah, Shas Hanisim and Shechianu, but you don't make the bracha at the end. Why would there be a difference? Why should you make the brachas in the beginning when not the brachas in the end? So he explains that the bracha at the end, right, that last bracha, is not a bracha that's actually related to the Megillah. It's a bracha about thanking God and publicizing the miracle. So therefore, that bracha is only established and we only see that bracha when there's a tzibur, which is 10 people together, and not if we say it, saying it as an individual. But then he says that the custom is that we should, even if you're reading it on your own, you say the bracha anyways. So it's a nice discussion, nice difference. But at the end of the day, it seems like you should still say the bracha. And normally, what we do is that the person who's reading the Megillah, the Baal Koreh, makes the bracha, and everyone else is yotze through his reading of the bracha and his reading of the Megillah. Yeah, I mean, it could mostly those brachos can even be said by someone else. Like, let's say someone else wanted to make the bracha and be mostly everyone else. Most people say that's okay. But I think what we really do is have the Baal Koreh make the Megillah because and some people don't like that. This is an important discussion, um, especially if you're the one leading the Megillah, and if you want to read the Megillah for other people. Let's say you already read the Megillah, you already fulfilled your mitzvah. So the halacha is you can still make the bracha to be motzi other people. To, like, let's say you read the Megillah in shul, and then someone hasn't heard the Megillah, so you go to read for them, or someone comes to read for you because you didn't get to hear the Megillah in shul, but they already heard the Megillah. So that person can make the bracha, but some say if the other person knows how to make the bracha themselves, that's better for them to make the bracha. We are Megillah, so I think either one works. But just an important thing to remember that is that if a man is reading the Megillah for a woman, just for a woman, and he had already fulfilled his mitzvah. Let's say the man goes to shul, he comes back, he wants to read for his wife. So we mentioned this in the past, but we'll repeat it again, that it's a different bracha, that they say instead of mikra Megillah, I'm reading the Megillah, bracha is lishmoa mikra Megillah, to hear the Megillah being read. Because some say that the woman's obligation is in the listening of the Megillah and not in the reading of the Megillah. There's also discussion about the bracha of Shechianu, that the Mishnah Berurah writes that it's proper to have kavana. You should have intent when you stay in here Shechianu for the other mitzvahs of Purim. So what does he list off? He says you should have kavana for the mitzvah of mishloach manos, giving gifts to other people, and for the suda, the meal of Purim. But what he doesn't include is to have kavana for matanus labionim, when you give money to the poor. So why doesn't he include that? So perhaps some explain the reason is because you're really obligated the whole year to give tzedakah, and this is just like another mitzvah of tzedakah. It's just more specific to Purim itself, but really the whole year you're doing tzedakah, so there's no shechianu that you would say. You should also in regard to the brachas that you should try not to. You should not make any interruption in between the brachas and the Megillah, both the brachas before the reading of the Megillah and after you finish reading the Megillah until the bracha at the end. And then also the minhag is that this is not really related to the brachas, but just something that I guess went here in my notes, that the minhag is that the person reading the Megillah holds on to the Megillah with his bare hands, which is interesting because when we read a Torah, we try not to touch the Torah. So why does a person why can the Bakor read the Megillah? Touch the Megillah with his bare hands. So that's a little bit of discussion, but we say that the person reading the Megillah should ideally wash his hands beforehand before he touches the Megillah. People also have the practice to fold over the Megillah when they're reading the Megillah. Why do they do that? If you look at people reading the Megillah, it's a little bit strange. Why do they do that? Because it's supposed to look like a letter, which shows the miracle. If you're following along on your own Megillah, some say you don't need to do that because that's a little bit harder. But anyways, that's in regard to the brachas of the Megillah. The next point of discussion is reading the Megillah in public, b'tzibur, with 10 people. So the main mitzvah is to read the Megillah in tzibur, in public, with 10 other people, because of parsumei nisa, spreading the miracle, and the rovam hadras melech, which means like the greater the amount of people, the better the mitzvah is. So being that that's the case, there are some interesting points that come because of that. The halacha is that if we even stop Torah in order for people to hear the Megillah being read in public. That even if 100 people are learning in one house, we tell them that they should stop their learning to go and read the Megillah with everyone else. And so, if we're going to stop Torah for everyone to hear the Megillah publicly, and all together, then for sure other mitzvos and for sure not mitzvos, we tell people that they should stop as well to try to hear the Megillah being read in public. The point is really to try to read it with at least 10 people. And the bigger the reading, the better. What if you daven in a smaller minyan the whole year? You need to go to the shul to hear the Megillah. So that's I think most people say no, you don't need to. That if you always daven in the same place, then even if the shul is having a bigger Megillah reading, it's okay for you to read it with the minyan that you daven with the whole year. Just some some questions that the OU puts out, like question and answer. I think they're very interesting. So we'll share two right now. That the question is as follows: given that it's preferable to hear Megillas Esther together with a large crowd, right? That's our discussion. But Rov Am Hadras Melech, meaning the more people, the better. So the question is as follows: is it better to daven with a small crowd at the Vasikim minyan at sunrise, right? Nates to daven nates if it's going to be a smaller amount of people, or should you daven with a larger crowd at the main minyan? That's a question. So what they write is as follows: that in this case, there's two competing factors. On the one hand, it's better to perform a mitzvah at the earliest opportunity. Reading maktim the mitzvahs. That's the concept that the sooner you do a mitzvah, the better. On the other hand, it's preferable to hear the Megillah together with a large crowd. That's our discussion here. The question is, which one of these considerations takes precedence? Which one wins? So Rav Zilberstein, he quote rules that in this case, it's proper to delay the mitzvah so it can be performed rovam. Normally, we'll always say to daven nates is the best, but here we say it's better to not daven nates. That's what Rav Zilberstein writes. This is because joining together with a large crowd offers a greater publication of the miracle, which is a fundamental component of the mitzvah of reading the Megillah. However, he writes, if one is accustomed to davening with the Vasikim minyan all week long, they should daven there in Perm as well. That's because the Mishnah Berurah writes that one who has a makom kavua, a set place to daven, does not need to change the location to daven berova. Okay, so that seems to be the answer. Do we have a question?
Yeah, why don't you just daven Amida Nates and then just wait to hear the Megillah with everybody else, and they can really fulfill everything, no problem.
I mean, I think that the probably you want to fulfill your obligation in the best possible way. That if you do it at Nate's, and you fulfill your obligation at Nate's, and you have a mind to be Yote, then you can't be Yote anymore with the second Megillah reading.
You're not hearing the Megillah Nates, you're davening the Amida Nates. So daven the Amida Nates and then wait to hear the Megillah later on.
Right. So you could do that, but I think the question is that should you have the intent? I mean, maybe that's even better, but I think maybe perhaps they tell you to do that, but then the second part of the question is is it better to hear the Megillah earlier? Because why would you push off reading the Megillah? Because that minyan is still going to read the Megillah, and if you're going to wait until the next minyan, you're pushing off a mitzvah. So for that, it seemed to be Rav Zilberstein was saying that it's better to wait until the second more people. And then they put another question that they say, women are certainly obligated in the mitzvah of Megillah reading, as we discussed. Is it preferable for women to go to shul to hear the Megillah reading, or is it equally acceptable for them to hear the Megillah at home if that is easier? This is a very relevant question. So this is what they write. That regarding the performance of mitzvos, there's a general concept, like we discussed, Berov Am Hadras Melech, which means when a crowd performs a mitzvah, it's more beautiful. This is especially true for the reading of Megillas Esther, which incorporates an element pursuing needs to publicizing the miracle. The larger the crowd, the greater the publicity. So the question is whether the concept of Berov Am applies to women as well. This is all what we discussed. Now we're just adding an extra factor: is would that apply to women? So we would seem to answer why not, but they write here that this seems to be a matter of dispute among poskim. The Chalkas Yaakov writes that there is no obligation of Berov Am for women. The Mishnah Berurah writes as well that only in some communities do the women go to shul to hear the Megillah reading. However, the Chayei Adam writes that indeed men, women, and children should all make the effort to hear the Megillah in shul in order to fulfill the mitzvah in an optimal manner. Berov Am. So they say, at the end of the day, what should you do? In practice, there are different customs, and one should consult the local rabbi. Okay, so whatever, whatever are the Rosh Hashiva paskins, that's what you should do. The
That was
Rosh
my
Hashiva,
question.
that was your question.
Yeah, obviously, that was not to be an upstart. I really wanted to know.
Does the Rosh Hashiva have a psak on Zoom or?
No, no, no. I wanted to know what part of all of this applies to women.
But yeah, so that's a discussion. So you should ask. You should definitely ask the rabbi. And my father writes, "Let the women choose. Let the woman choose what she wants." Okay, so that would seem to be the answer in regard to that. That you can do either one. Okay. Next discussion is just halachas in regard to reading the Megillah. This is really a lot, but they'll go very quickly. That it's prohibited to speak during the reading of the Megillah because that would be an interruption. And let's say you spoke and you missed a word, you did not fulfill your obligation. However, as we'll mention later on, we'll mention it here right now, that the Megillah really needs to the Megillah, when you hear the Megillah being read by the Baal Korah, the guy reading the Megillah, so that's the best way you can fulfill your obligation because you're hearing the Megillah being read from a kosher Megillah itself. But let's say you're just reading it in a chumash. Does that count? So we treat that as if basically you're reading a Megillah by heart because you're hearing the Baal Korah reading the Megillah by heart because you're not reading it from a Megillah. And the halacha is that let's say you have a Megillah that's not full, like it was missing some words, and the Baal Korah had to read some of it by heart. So we say that that's okay, that counts, as long as most of the Megillah is okay, and he's reading most of the Megillah inside. So the same would be true here, that if you miss a word and you're able to read the word in the Chumash, and then continue with the Baal Korah, and you would be okay. So even if you miss one word, as long as you're following along in the Chumash and reading inside, you should be fine because in the most of the Megillah you're going to have heard from the Baal Korah, meaning to have heard from the kosher Megillah. But just in general, you should not speak also during the Megillah reading because that's very distracting to other people. And if you're in shul, if you're in yeshiva to hear the Megillah, then you should really be trying to listen to the Megillah and following along inside. It's permitted to read the Megillah standing or sitting, but the ideal is that the Baal Korah stands out of respect to the community. The one who's reading the Megillah should have kavana, but we say he probably does have kavana. Okay. This we mentioned before that one can read the Megillah for another person, even if he has already performed the mitzvah. But one should still fulfill their obligation and show beforehand. But you can read for this is interesting. Like I don't know when this would come up, but I guess if you need to read for someone and the big minyan is happening later on. Like let's say your friend has to leave at 7 a.m. and the Megillah reading is at 8:30. So you could and you know how to read, but he doesn't know how to read. So you can read for him at 6:30 from 6:30 to 7, and have intent to not fulfill your obligation because the best way to fulfill your obligation, like we discussed, is in a shul with a bunch of people, or in a yeshiva with a bunch of people. So you can have the intention to not be say when you read to him to not fulfill your obligation, and then you could go later on to read it in public. So if the other person also knows how to read the Megillah and there's not people, so some say that you should really read it on its own, but others say you can still read the other person. Okay. You should make sure to read the Megillah all at once and in order. Let's say you're reading the Megillah and you're dozing off. So if you're the one reading, then and you're dozing off, so that's okay. But if you're just listening, then and you're dozing off, you're probably missing a lot of stuff. So that's not good. If you don't have a Megillah, then you read from a Chumash. Like let's say someone like you don't have a Megillah and no one's going to read a Megillah for you. So what should you do? So you should still read from a Chumash. Don't make a bracha, because so that way we don't forget about reading the Megillah. If nobody in the community knows how to read the Megillah with the right truck, with the right mim, then you can even write them in. That's what the Mishnah Berurah says. You could write it inside the Megillah. But if you didn't write it in, then you can read it without the truck. This is very interesting. I'll just read the words of the Ramah. He's going to talk about the booing of Haman. We definitely have that minhag. So the Ramah, he writes that Shenagu hatinokes latzuras Haman al eitim v'avan. That there's the practice that the young children used to draw the image of Haman on these different trees or these stones, or they would write Haman's name on it, and lahakos and zel that they would smack each other. That way they would erase the name of Haman by smacking these trees and stones together that had Haman on it, either his name or his picture. He quotes on Psukim, Machotim Chazecher Amalek, Ushem Mishan Yirkov. Okay, but then he says Umizesh and Ishtarbi Vaminag. So he says the custom got a little mixed up. That they Shemakim Haman Kishikurin and Megillah Knesset. That nowadays in shul that they all smack Haman when they're reading Megillah in Beis Knesset in shul. So that's the minute got a little confused. But then he says, so that minhag doesn't seem correct, to make noise when we hear Haman's name. But then the Ramah says, but he says, that the minhag, the customs of Klal Yisrael are customs, and we have to follow them. So we still follow it. And he said that the Chacham Tzvi, he would stamp his legs when he heard Haman. The Pri Megadim says it's not good because the noise messes up people. They're confused, they're not going to hear the Megillah. Definitely, I think our minhag is to make noise at Haman. My chavrusa was telling me that the minute that he dominated in the past in YU, the rabbi gets up. It's not the main minyan. I told him maybe he needs to go to the main minyan after our discussion here. But he told me that the rabbi gets up there and he says, "Okay, we're going to take a vote. You can either boo at the first time we say Amen and the last time, and none in the middle, or you could boo at every single one." Then he goes, "Just kidding. It's not a vote. We're going to do the first one and the last one." Okay, so that's his little trick that he does every year. But I think most people boo at probably every Amen. The custom is when you're reading the Megillah to read 4 different psukim out loud. And if you look at these psukim, you pay attention to the Megillah reading, you're going to realize that these different psukim, they all connected to the redemption, and it's really about the beginning of the miracle and the end of the miracle. The Mishnah Berurah writes that the reason that we say them all aloud is because of joy, and it wakes up the young children who are listening to the Megillah, so they don't fall asleep, but they pay attention. But the Chazan, the one who's reading the Megillah, the Valkari, you should read them back because the main mitzvah is to hear from the Megillah. We also have the practice that the one reading the Megillah should raise his voice when he gets to in the 6th parak, Balayla hu nadada, that at that night Achashverosh couldn't sleep, because that's where the beginning of the miracle starts. There's also the practice to read all of Haman's children one breath to show they all died and were hung at once. And the practice is to start from a few words before we start mentioning Haman's names. Chamesh me'os ish, the 500 people. And the reason for that is because Haman's children were officers over 500 people who also apparently died. And the minhag is that everyone in the community reads it before. Most people have that minhag, they read it before the guy reading it. There's different discussions, but I think the most simple reason why everyone reads it beforehand is because you probably can't understand it when the Balkora reads all 10 of someone's names at once. There's also, if you watch the guy reading the Megillah, sometimes people do this. They like to shake the Megillah when they mention the word Igeris. Igeris means letter. They say Igeris has those, so they like pick up the Megillah. And so in the night, some people say the prayer of Asher Ini. And after reading the Megillah, we usually mention we sing Shoshanas Yaakov, we say Ar Haman Baruch Mordechai. We'll just finish with a few, four different halachas in regard to Purim that one relates to Megillah, and then we'll stop. That if you know this halacha you think it's not so relevant, I think this year it might actually be relevant for some people. That if you know in advance you'll be traveling and you're not going to hear the Megillah on Purim, not going to be able to hear it. I guess it could be relevant normally, but that you should read it on the 13th or the 12th of Adar or the 11th, because that really is the Gemara and the Mishnah sort of talk about that is an okay time to read the Megillah. And if you have to, you could even read it from the beginning of the month. But you would read without a bracha, and try to have 10 people. Now this only works for Megillah, but all the other mitzvahs of Purim need to be performed on Purim itself. And I was just thinking that might be relevant if you're going out to battle for the soldiers who want to hear the Megillah. They know they're not going to be able to hear it on Purim itself, so they might want to hear the Megillah beforehand. This is just just good to be aware about, is that the Shulchan Aruch, he writes that it's permitted to do malacha, like work, like there's on Shabbos, like he's heard of malacha on Purim. He says it's okay to do it, but he also says that you're not going to see any bracha, any blessings from the work that you do on Purim. So there's many situations that it is okay, and I think normally our practice is to do regular malacha, to do normal activities on Purim. But it's just a interesting thing to be aware of, is that the Shulchan Aruch says that if you do the work that you do on Purim, you're not going to see bracha from it. So you have to look into that, see exactly what that means. Just good to be aware about. And then in regards to this year, Purim falls out on Motzei Shabbos. The Shabbos ends, and we're going to read the Megillah. So the halacha is, if that falls out, then I think this is our minute, but we say that you read the Megillah before Havdalah, because if you can delay saying Havdalah as late as you can, right, the more Shabbos you get, the more bracha you get for the rest of the week. So if you can delay saying Havdalah as Shabbos leaves, we try to do that. I think that's our practice, that we say Havdalah after we read the Megillah, because try to delay as late as possible. And then finally, the last point is that if you pay attention on Purim in davening, the Shulchan Aruch writes that we don't say Hallel on Purim. And the Mishnah Berurah says, why not? We should say Hallel on Purim. So he explains, because in Hallel we say the following phrase, Hallelu Avdei Hashem, that we're going to praise the servants of God, which means us. We're going to praise God. So he explains that we're praising God, that we're the servants of God and not the servants of Paro. But that, for example, in Pesach, when we were redeemed. However, after Purim, we were still servants to Achashverosh. We were still under his rule. We weren't only servants of God. So that's why we don't say Hallel on Purim, explained by the Mishnah Berurah. Okay, so we'll stop there. Does anyone have any points or questions?
Just thank you.